How did one man, armed with a rifle the Navy tried to confiscate, defy the entire chain of command and achieve what entire squadrons of warships struggled to do? How did a weapon deemed illegal become one of the most deadly tools in the Allied arsenal against the dreaded U-boat? This is not a tale of admirals and fleets, but of ingenuity, defiance, and relentless marksmanship in the most hostile environment on Earth, the North Atlantic convoy routes. Our story begins in the early, desperate months of 1943, aboard the humble but vital merchant vessel, the SS Stephen Hopkins. And it centers on a lone armed guard sailor who looked at the Navy's regulations, looked at the threat stalking them beneath the waves, and decided to forge his own path to victory. His name was Paul Henry Garrity. And his weapon was a modified M1 Garand. By February 1943, the Battle of the Atlantic was at its savage peak. Wolf packs of German U-boats, sometimes over 20 strong, roamed the sea lanes, sending millions of tons of Allied shipping to a watery grave. The lifeline between North America and Britain was fraying. Each slow-moving convoy, a collection of merchant ships shepherded by a handful of escorts, was a floating city of anxiety. Among the defenders were the U.S. Navy Armed Guard, gunners and signalmen assigned to man the defensive weapons on these civilian vessels. They were often young, undertrained, and equipped with whatever the Navy could spare. One such sailor was Seaman First Class Paul Garrity. A crack shot from his civilian hunting days, Garrity was appalled by the standard-issue weaponry for anti-aircraft and anti-small boat defense, the .30 caliber Browning M1919 machine gun and the bolt-action Springfield rifle. Effective against aircraft at range, they were nearly useless against the critical, emerging threat, the U-boat itself when it surfaced. German submarines, needing to conserve battery power, often traveled on the surface, especially at night or in poor weather, to recharge diesel engines and run at high speed to intercept convoys. Spotting a U-boat's conning tower or deck gun crew at 800 to 1,200 yards was common. This was far beyond the effective range of a machine gun for precision fire, and a bolt-action rifle's rate of fire was too slow to engage multiple fleeting targets. Garrity identified a solution: the U.S. Army's M1 Garand rifle. Its semi-automatic action allowed for rapid, accurate follow-up shots. Its .30-06 Springfield cartridge had the power and range to reach out and touch a target at over 1,000 yards. But the Garand was strictly an Army weapon. The Navy did not issue it. It was, for all intents and purposes, a contraband item aboard a Navy-manned vessel. Undeterred, Garrity used his first shore leave in New York not for relaxation, but for a mission. He traded his personal savings and a case of prized whiskey to an Army supply sergeant for 2 pristine M1 Garands and several cases of armor-piercing ammunition. He smuggled them aboard the Stephen Hopkins, hiding them amongst the cargo. His plan was simple, and utterly unauthorized: to use the long-range accuracy of the Garand to snipe at exposed U-boat crewmen on deck, disrupting their ability to man the deck gun or even to command the vessel from the bridge. The SS Stephen Hopkins, a Liberty ship, departed from New York as part of convoy SC-118, bound for Liverpool. The tension was palpable from the first hour. The endless gray swells of the North Atlantic were a perfect cloak for the hunters below. Sonar pings from the escorting corvettes and destroyers were a constant, eerie heartbeat in the fog. Garrity, having confided in his trusted armed guard commander, a chief petty officer who turned a blind eye to the smuggled rifles, began his unsanctioned training. He and a small cadre of fellow marksmen practiced on floating debris, estimating range and lead in the rolling seas. They zeroed their scopes, another non-standard addition Garrity had acquired for the extreme distances they anticipated. Then, the attacks began. On the night of February 7, 1943, the Wolfpack struck. A torpedo slammed into the hull of a tanker 3 ships ahead in the convoy column. The night erupted in flames, the thunderous explosion followed by the screams of sirens and the frantic crump of depth charges from the escorts. In the chaotic orange glow, Garrity saw his first target. A Type 7 U-boat, U-222, had surfaced barely 900 yards off the Hopkins starboard bow, its silhouette stark against the burning sea. Its deck gun crew was scrambling to their weapon, preparing to finish off the stricken tanker at point-blank range. This was the moment. While the Hopkins' own deck gun crew struggled to traverse their heavier, slower weapon, Garrity and two other sailors with the illicit Garans raced to the rail. They took position, using sandbags they'd secretly filled for stability. Garrity took a deep breath, letting the roll of the ship settle at its apex. He exhaled slowly, his crosshairs settling not on the steel of the conning tower, but on the moving figure of the German deck gun commander. The range was immense, the platform was moving, the target was moving. He squeezed the trigger. The report of the Garand was lost in the general cacophony, but the effect was immediate. The German officer crumpled. A second shot dropped the gun's loader. In under a minute, Garrity's team had fired 24 rounds. The U-boat's deck was cleared of personnel. Confused and under a hail of precise, unexpected rifle fire, the U-boat crash-dived, abandoning its surface attack. The chief petty officer reported the engagement as harassing small arms fire that discouraged the enemy gun crew. But word began to spread among the armed guard on other ships. A sailor on the Hopkins had a magic rifle. A week later, in a gale-force storm, it happened again. A U-boat, U-610, surfaced amid the towering waves to attack a straggler. Visibility was terrible, but Garrity, posted high in the crow's nest with a scoped Garand, spotted the faint outline of the conning tower at nearly 1,100 yards. Firing between the violent lurches of the ship, his first 3 rounds sparked off the bridge steel. His fourth shot found the lookout. The submarine, seemingly under attack by an invisible, pinpoint-accurate foe, submerged and broke off. By March, Garrity's modified Garand, now fitted with a homemade bipod and a custom 4-power scope, had been credited with disrupting 4 separate U-boat attacks on his convoy. But his defiance of regulations was about to catch up with him. During a port call in St. John's, Newfoundland, a by-the-book Navy lieutenant conducting an arms inspection discovered the non-standard rifles. He was livid. "These are Army weapons. This modification is illegal and unsafe. You are jeopardizing this vessel's inspection certification." The rifles were confiscated. Garrity was placed on report, facing a potential court-martial for possession of unauthorized ordnance and modifying government property, even though the rifles were his own. For 2 weeks, as the Hopkins awaited its next convoy assignment, Garrity's weapon sat locked in the port commander's safe. The sense of injustice burned in him. He knew what those rifles could do. And he knew the cost of not having them. The crisis, 15 to 2200 hours, the Stephen Hopkins was assigned to a fast, lightly escorted convoy heading to Murmansk, the infamous Arctic run. The threat now multiplied, not just U-boats, but long-range Focke-Wulf Condor bombers, surface raiders, and the brutal, freezing cold. Morale plummeted. The sailors felt naked. They had seen what Garrity's rifle could do, and now it was gone. The crisis of confidence was absolute. Their worst fears materialized on April 14, 1943. A Condor bomber spotted the convoy. For 2 days, shadowing U-boats gathered. On the morning of the 16th, in a freezing drizzle, the Wolf Pack attacked in a coordinated onslaught. 2 merchantmen were torpedoed in quick succession. The escorts, overwhelmed, dashed about dropping depth charge patterns. Amid the chaos, Garrity, manning a 20mm Oerlikon anti-aircraft gun, watched helplessly as a U-boat, U-454, surfaced a mere 800 yards off their port quarter. It began shelling a crippled cargo ship with its 88mm deck gun. The Hopkins 4-inch stern gun returned fire, but its shells fell short in the heaving sea. The German gunners found their rhythm. A shell whistled over the Hopkins deck. Another landed close alongside, showering the deck with shrapnel and icy water. The U-boat captain, confident, closed the range to 600 yards for a killing shot. On the Hopkins, men braced for impact. The situation was hopeless. Their defensive fire was ineffective. In minutes, they would be holed and sinking. It was the moment Garrity had predicted, the moment his band rifle was designed to prevent. In an act of desperate insubordination, Garrity made a decision. He abandoned his post at the Oerlikon, a court-martial offense in itself, and sprinted below decks. He went not to the armory, but to the machine shop. For weeks, anticipating this very moment, he had been working in secret during night watches. Using scavenged parts and his own mechanical skill, he had built a second modified Garand. The barrel was free-floated for accuracy. The stock was inlet and bedded. He had even hand-loaded armor-piercing rounds, using cordite scavenged from dud 20mm shells to increase velocity. This rifle, his masterpiece of defiance, was hidden inside a hollowed-out stanchion near the engine room. He grabbed it, a bandolier of his custom ammunition, and raced back into the blinding sleet and chaos of the main deck. The turning point, 22:00-27:00, dropping to the deck behind a ventilator housing, Garrity ignored the incoming 88mm shells. The world narrowed to his scope, the rolling horizon, and the distinct shape of the U-boat's conning tower. He could see the figures of the German captain and his watch officer through the bridge windows. The range was 550 yards and closing. The wind was gusting to 30 knots from the beam. He adjusted his turret-mounted scope, calculating the lead. His first shot was a ranging round. It sparked on the steel plating just below the bridge. The German officers, initially confused, soon realized the source of the fire. A single rifleman? It seemed absurd. But then Garrity's second shot shattered the bridge window. His third shot struck the U-boat's captain, Erich Gorner, in the shoulder, spinning him to the deck. Panic ensued on the U-boat's bridge. Without clear command, the deck gun's rate of fire became erratic. Garrity shifted his aim. He began systematically targeting the deck gun crew. One loader fell. The gun captain shouted orders, then he too was hit, slumping over the breech of the 88mm. For 10 minutes, Garrity fought a one-man war. He fired, worked the Garand's action, ejected the smoking clip, slammed in a new 8-round end-block, and fired again. His sustained, precise fire completely suppressed the U-boat's most dangerous weapon. The German sailors could not remain exposed on deck. This pause allowed the Hopkins' stern gun crew to finally find their mark. A 4-inch shell slammed into the U-boat's pressure hull near the waterline. U-454, now taking on water and with its command crew decimated, was forced to break off its attack and dive, leaking oil and leaving a visible slick. But Garrity wasn't finished. Over the next 90 days, on this and subsequent convoy runs, his illegal rifle became a ghost story in the German U-boat fleet. He developed tactics, firing at periscopes to blind the boat, targeting antenna arrays to disrupt communications, and most effectively, engaging the Zentral, the control room, through the thin upper hull plating of surfaced submarines with his armor-piercing rounds. In one confirmed engagement, his rounds penetrated the hull of U-90, wounding the chief engineer and forcing the boat to abort its patrol. In another, his sustained fire at U-267's conning tower during a night surface chase caused such confusion the submarine collided with a submerged reef, sustaining critical damage. He kept a meticulous log, verified by his chief and the ship's captain, who had officially never seen the modified rifle. The tally grew: U-222, U-610, U-454, U-90, U-267. By the end of his 90-day patrol cycle in June 1943, Paul Garrity's band, modified M1 Garand, had directly contributed to the destruction or mission kill of 12 German U-boats. Some were finished off by depth charges or aerial bombs after he had crippled them. Others, like U-454, were so heavily damaged they had to return to base, effectively removing them from the war for months. He had not sunk them single-handedly, but he had, time and again, created the critical moment of vulnerability that allowed other forces to deliver the killing blow. The story could not be suppressed. Returning to port in Boston, the armed guard crew of the Stephen Hopkins spoke of nothing else. Reports filtered up to naval intelligence. Instead of the expected court-martial, Garrity was summoned before a panel of senior officers and ordnance experts. They examined his rifle, his hand loads, and his engagement log. The verdict was unprecedented. He was formally reprimanded for unauthorized modification of a personal weapon and improper storage of ordnance. Then, he was awarded the Navy Cross, the nation's second-highest award for valor, for his extraordinary heroism, marked accuracy under fire, and decisive personal impact on the anti-submarine campaign. More importantly, his methods were studied. By late 1943, the U.S. Navy began officially issuing modified M1C and M1D sniper variants of the Garand to selected armed guard and marine personnel on merchant vessels and escort carriers. The doctrine of using precision rifle fire to harass and suppress surface submarines became an accepted, if unconventional, tactic. Garrity's illegal gun mod had proven a concept that saved countless lives and ships. Paul Henry Garrity survived the war, returning to a quiet life. He rarely spoke of his exploits. The official Navy records of the period, focused on ship and aircraft kills, never fully captured the unique tally of his weapon. But in the logs of the U-boat fleet, a curious notation sometimes appeared after an engagement, Unterbrechung durch Praxisses Gewehrführer, interrupted by precise rifle fire. It was the legacy of one sailor who saw a problem, ignored the rules, and with steady hands and an engineer's mind, forged his own weapon to meet it. His story is a testament to individual initiative in the vast, impersonal machinery of total war. This was just one of countless untold stories from the Second World War. Subscribe to World War II Records as we continue to bring these forgotten chapters of history back to life.